We are now ready for our Future of Learning panel. And to host that, we have a man whom AT&T, Coca-Cola, IBM, and Delta rely on to tell their stories through virtual and augmented reality. Please welcome the managing partner of Foundry 45, Dave Beck, ladies and gentlemen. Here he is.
Good afternoon, FutureX. How is everyone? Yeah? We all awake after lunch? Yeah. I'm super excited to be here because we have an awesome panel today. This group of thought leaders is here to talk about the dramatic changes that are happening at a fundamental level, and that's in the way that we learn. New technology and new workforce that's coming out has totally changed things. They're what's leading that change. The older generation that I keep slipping further into every day, we were brought up on structured, rote kind of pen and paper learning, and that's completely changed. It's a whole new ball game with new technology, mobile platforms, immersive technologies like AR and VR. It's completely changed the game. And we're fortunate to have a group of experts here that's going to tell us about their vision for the future. We have multiple published authors. We have university educators. We have folks that have done innovative Fortune 500 training experiences. And we even have one expert in mind control. Yeah, it's true. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. We'd like to start, if you could just, we'll go down the line here, if you could share your name and then give us a powerful example of when you realize that the learning game is truly changing.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. My name is Brandon Carson. I am one of the directors of learning at Delta Airlines. My team supports all of the agents that work in the airports across the world. One moment that sticks with me on kind of the future of learning was in 1994 at the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, when I saw one of the first iterations of Netscape Navigator broadcasting the Olympics live. And that kind of stuck with me because it seems like that's an inflection point for us. And that's when, for me, definitely, because I was in textbook publishing, that's when everything changed for me.
That's great, Brennen.
Good afternoon. My name is Brennen Dicker. I'm the Executive Director of Creative Media Industries Institute for Georgia State University. We're teaching the next generation of digital storytellers through emerging technologies, including augmented reality, virtual reality, and gaming. I think my first experience as far as digital learning is concerned, and what really struck me was my oldest daughter in elementary school and seeing how education was changing and how the technology was being introduced online, but also in gamification and the individual learning, and how a student could go in and actually learn more in their class by taking their own route, and actually then the analytics behind that. So it really intrigued me on that end.
Good afternoon. I'm Crystal Kadakia. I'm the founder of Invati Consulting. For the past 7 years, I've been researching behavior and where it intersects with workplace culture. So for me, I would say, I remember when in middle school, we begged my parents to buy us the encyclopedia set, the World Encyclopedia. There's door-to-door salesmen at the time, totally different world. And I remember 3 years later, the internet really started. And now this encyclopedia set that was in our house, the World Encyclopedia, became irrelevant. Then a couple years later, fast forward 5 or 7 years, I joined the workforce. And then I saw the intranet, and it was still running Internet Explorer, something. That's when I realized that, wow, the future of learning is changing, and we still have yet to catch up with that change.
Outstanding.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Adrienne Randolph, and I am the founder and executive director of the BrainLab at Kennesaw State University. I'm also a professor of information systems in the Coles College of Business there. And for me, there's 2 points in time. 2002 is when I began my journey in brain-computer interfaces, so being able to control devices with just your thoughts, and this wow science fiction paradigm happening in real life. Well, fast forward to 2018, and in the BrainLab, being able to take those same technologies of being able to read your brain waves and control devices to be able to understand what you're thinking, and in this case, pinpoint cognitive load for learners within a biochemistry setting. So we were actually able to see when someone is mentally overloaded and then change the curriculum around that.
Yeah, that stuff blows my mind completely. And I try and relate to it and understand it. I can definitely relate to what Brennen's saying. Interestingly enough, both of our oldest children are actually in the same grade in the same school, which is fairly random. But yes, thanks everyone. At this point, I'd kind of like to drill down a little bit deeper on both kind of the corporate side and on the academic side. And we've got a couple of different groups here. So maybe Brandon and I don't know, Crystal, if you can potentially follow up on this one. Super interested to know on the corporate side, you know, there's new technologies and methodologies that are coming out every day, right? Immersive technology, buzzwords like micro-learning, gamification, and mobile's been a huge game changer. What trends are you most excited about and why?
Well, good question. I think there are, for corporate learning, I think we're entering an area where we're at an inflection point. And I think there's three things corporate L&D should really be focusing on. One is building a digital mindset. Two is targeting the right talent and investing more. And three is keeping the human element involved in all of what we do. So by building a digital mindset, what I mean by that is we now understand that every worker at every level in every organization will interact with technology to get their work done from now on. And so within the organizations, L&D needs to be the center of excellence driving how to develop people to be able to interact with the technology that they're using to get their job done. By targeting the right talent and investing more, quite frankly, a couple of years ago, a lot of our companies got a really great tax break, a once in 100 years kind of tax break, and most of them have squandered it because they invested more in technology and infrastructure and flat or less investment in people development. And that's going to be very costly as we move forward. So we definitely need our companies to invest more in talent development. There's almost more workers in America. There's 50% of us that are age 50 or older, and they're planning their retirement. And that skills deficit is going to be massive when they leave the workplace. And then keeping the humanity involved. I mean, technically, L&D should be driving employee wellness programs, workplace development programs, workplace experience programs, so that we can start building an employee experience that mimics the customer experiences, and also really aggressively focusing on the leadership deficit that we have in our workforce now. Those three areas, I think, are the biggest places L&D should be focusing on right now. And then the tools and methods that the L&D organizations use will be the foundation for driving those strategies.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to corporate and learning, there's fundamentally corporate L&D's wired to do one thing, classroom training. The next thing that happens is we start looking at our tools, these new tools come on, and everyone gets really excited about the tools. Right now, the hot thing is micro-learning. You know, there's been e-learning for a while. We're talking about new LMS systems, but these are all just tools. So there's amazing things I could say about AI and VR and the potential for them, but the real challenge is how are we using these tools in a very intentional way? And because corporate, from an L&D standpoint, we're so used to being an event-based system. You know, one of the big things I always hear is, well, training, that's just something you send people to. That's not how we learn today. How we learn today is an experience that spans all the different moments when we need learning in our own personal lives. The moment you need to know something, you pull it up on YouTube, you figure out how to do it or whatnot. Kids today, it's a choice, right? It's a path. There's no one path to getting a certain learning. A lot of kids are contemplating, do I even go to college? Or can I get this learning better on my own? So the hottest trend for me that I'm excited about is really rethinking from a corporate lens. You're not just sending people to training, you're rethinking what does it mean to create and deliver a learning experience. And for that, our corporate L&D folks need a whole new set of skills where they're not just order takers, but they're really skilled to deliver learning experiences across VR, how to integrate AI in a way that enables and empowers our talent, how we're looking at AR to augment our workplaces, especially in critical areas of high risk, but also as you talk about just the daily nuances, the non-ideal situations that we need to really ramp people up in very quickly. And people aren't just looking for this once a year or once a quarter. They're looking for it as a seamless experience in the moments that they need it. And so for me, that hottest trend is how do we get from a single event to learning as a continuum, learning as an integration of our lives.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned things like YouTube and the fact that people can learn anytime, any place, Khan Academy, things like that. And so we're looking for, what kind of tools are the most powerful. So I'm interested from a more academic kind of perspective, Dr. Adrienne and Brennen, if you guys could maybe comment on what are some of the things you're doing over the coming years to actually meet the needs of the current crop of undergrad and grad level students?
It's interesting to hear the integration of what's happening in industry versus in academia, where arguably professors move a little slower in the uptake of how to change their classroom and change our techniques. And so the concept of online learning is still rather nascent within the academy. And all that can happen for an online learner versus face-to-face in the classroom. For example, having someone in the same exact course for myself in an online fashion feel like they know me just as well as if they took the course face-to-face because of an integration of video or asynchronous discussion being built in is an interesting concept when I don't physically see those individuals. But from a BrainLab perspective, it's more about the possibilities of technological integration in those settings. So as sensor technology improves, and we all have a taste of biometrics in our phones right now, being able to sign on with your fingerprint, for example, or your face, well, think about that advancement in the classroom and how even if you are remotely positioned, that a web camera could be able to enhance your experience and interaction with your instructor to know, are you getting this material? Why are you scrunching your face up right now? And having some flags coming back to the instructor to help us improve that interaction and having that happen real time.
I'm not traditionally from the academic world. I come from the film and television industry, and so I started my appointment about 8 months ago at CMII, and I think what is unique about the institute that I'm a part of is that we have professors of practice that are from the industry. We also have the scholarly professors as well. So we're integrating and combining both of them. The thing that I think is one of the things that we're attempting, because we're 2 years old and I think we have a little bit more flexibility in our curriculum, but the one thing we were trying to move forward now is to tie the curriculum with industry a little bit more intently as to making sure that we're moving in the right direction, whether it's in gaming or AR and VR, or even in film and television for that matter. Another thing that I think we pride ourselves in is some of the in-residence companies that we have, Foundry 45, one of Dave's company right there that's actually at CMII, and also working with Todd Harris at High Res Studios and trying to incorporate a little bit more, giving the students a little bit more access with companies directly and making sure that they have a well-rounded education, but also that we're getting them to a point where they can graduate and move on into those positions. Obviously, we want them to be great storytellers, but we also want to show them the pipelines in these industries as to the different places that they can go once they get out.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've heard a couple times talking about real time, actually looking at how they're interacting with a piece of learning material immediately to find out whether they're actually getting it or not. One of the most interesting things that I think is coming up is how personalized it's getting to be. And in the time that we have left, I'd like to ask one final question, and all of you please spend a minute or two. It's a two-parter. First of all, as learning and development becomes more personalized, what does that look like as the technology is evolving? And then also, what are some of the pitfalls that we're going to encounter as part of that?
So my world is interesting in that we're a heavily compliant world. So we have a lot of compliance training. So many of our folks need to be qualified to do certain tasks. And a lot of the qualification is year over year, you sit in front of the same courseware and you do the same thing, regardless of what you already know about the qualification. And so we're working on trying to integrate some more adaptive algorithms into play so that we can meet that learner where they are as an individual and where they are on that spectrum of knowledge as it applies to the qualification that they need to do a certain task. And it's a pretty serious compliance method, because if you're not qualified to do something, you can't go and work around an airplane or the aircraft. And so,
Which is good.
Which is good.
We all appreciate that.
And safety is always the number one challenge we have for our workforce. And so what we would like to do, instead of spending the thousands of hours to millions of hours a year on just the rote compliance training, is really have that compliance training adapt to where those workers are in their knowledge. And the great thing is we have a very open and transparent relationship with the FAA, and they're very open to us bringing in and integrating these algorithms to ensure that people have the qualified skills they need, and do it in a way where they don't have to just sit through the same stuff year over year that they already know. And so the great thing is leveraging technology or integrating it in a way to personalize that experience based on someone who has maybe 1 year's experience or 20 years experience, and they're more masterful in those qualifications that they need to be in.
Yeah, who would like to go next?
I would say that the big thing on the educational front for me as I look forward the next 5 years, we've got this big wave of technology that seems to be coming at us, and we keep on hearing about AR and VR, and I think for those of us that read up on it and that are actually immersed in it, we see this wave coming, and I think it's going to be very disruptive in many industries and business. And I think the one thing that you want to try to do as an educator is to figure out how we can best educate the students so they can be prepared for this when they go out in the world. The biggest thing to me is adaptability and making sure they know how to learn, because they'll have to be curious their whole lives, as we all should, in adapting, because I think a lot of what we're going to see is going to be game changers in industry with artificial intelligence specifically.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I mentioned already is around how L&D needs to really shift from one event to thinking about multiple learning paths to the same goal as a part of the way to personalize. And I don't think we're used to designing that way. So that's one thing I'm directly working on, is helping L&D teams figure out how do we stop just designing for a one-size-fits-all process and really look at this as creating many infinite learning paths towards particular performance goals. I think the second thing that really comes to mind for me is I'm very excited by AI. I think it can really shortcut and help scale and help filter through the vast quantity of information we're now dealing with in a very intelligent way. And at the same time, I think one of the pitfalls is that we can almost have too much insight or too much data about our own learning ability, and that can be risky. So for example, what you were saying of being able to tell if someone's face is scrunching up in the middle of learning something. Hey, well, part of learning is failure, and if we now start getting worried about, well, it looks like I'm having a hard time learning this, so I think that can create a little bit of fear or anxiety for the learner. So I think there's going to be, when I look at the vision of the future, there's very much an intentionality component, even as we think about personalization and intimate data, and how is that data almost maybe too intimate sometimes to create a healthy learning atmosphere, and what might that look like as we are intentionally creating these learning experiences. So walking a very fine balance between creating an optimal learning environment with fear and anxiety, and also motivation and engagement.
Are you seeing privacy come up a lot in the meetings that you're having right now, both with kind of a corporate client or just with the learner in general?
So one of the things that came up for me recently is in China, actually, I was reading this article, some of you may have read it, where they've actually installed cameras that have facial recognition capability in all the classrooms and schools. and not every single school signed up for this, of course, it's a big country, but what their teachers are able to see which students are distracted, which students are not. The students actually protested and put a cover over the camera during final exam time because the pressure was just incredibly high. You know, you can now call someone's parents and say, well, your kid's sleeping in class and I can see it, I've got the proof, or you know, they're distracted. And so I think that level of pressure is maybe, or can be counterproductive. And it's very different in China than here, right? So the company advised the schools to ask for permission before installing these cameras, but a lot of schools don't ask for permission. And so the students were just told, oh, there's a camera, you had to walk into a room, get your picture taken, so that way they could input it in for the facial recog, you know, data input. And they were like, oh, it's just a thing we're doing. You know,
Yeah,
you would never do that here, right? Walk into a school, oh, it's just a thing we're doing. You'd have parents on.
Pretty happy that wasn't actually a thing when I was in school.
Yeah, but that's what
Do you see that at
Chinese
all,
parents are
Dr.
saying. It's like, whoa, don't want them to be a student now.
I think it's an interesting example that you bring up and understanding who's using the data. Because at one point we talked about extreme life logging and how we were able to take all of these different points of data about yourselves and what are you doing with that. And so as sensor technology improves, to me, the harness that you have for yourself on pinpointing how do I improve this moment for myself, whether that's through some technology that you are personally using for augmenting your experience or understanding your own level of cognition and overload and being able to say, oh, this feeling, this is why this is happening right now. And maybe there's some complementarity that happens between the instructor and the student. So I absolutely, especially from
Who has the data?
yes,
That's a
information
very big
systems
question.
perspective, have that concern. So I would say the power being in the user's hand is something that is also really exciting to think about what can happen.
Outstanding. Well, I think we're about at the end of our time, so I just want to say thanks to the great panel here. Let's give it up for them. And let's also take a second to give it up for Moxie. What an amazing event that they put on here. Thank you, Moxie. Thanks, everyone. And here's to a great rest of the afternoon. Cheers.